that now we're going to actually verify, because we don't trust these companies. And in fact, but we're going to pay them back for it. We're going to let them bill us the cost of the certification of the process and building a security program, which is huge. It's an allowable cost. In the past, it was overhead at a high level. You couldn't bill out to the government. So the verification component, and the goal is a cost-effective and affordable for SMBs to implement lower levels. So like I mentioned, there's levels 1 through 5. Levels 4 and 5, you got to think of those companies as the Booz Allens, the companies that are dealing with very serious and large amounts of information. The bulk of the companies, based on recent guidance, are going to be 3 and under. Okay, so now this is important because I think it's daunting for a lot of companies starting off like, oh man, if you look at these requirements, I got to get to level 5. Well, no, you don't. To meet the contract, if you want to get further levels to win more contracts, then you can, but it's going to specify, and it's all going to be based on what type of information you're handling and what you're doing. Third-party organizations are going to do this. So companies, say like mine, for example, they're independent companies. You got to go hire to bring them in. This can't be done in-house. It can't be done by a self-attestation. You got to bring companies in. Everybody says, well, how much is it going to cost? Well, no one knows yet, but you could plan for budgeting purposes. I say plan for 15 to 20K for an assessment, for a certification, give or take. And depending on your environment, there's a lot of variables in there, but I like to just throw that out for expectation. That's generally most risk assessments in the market. They're around that price. Sometimes they're more if you're a really large company or if you got a lot of software. But just keep that in mind. But that's not published yet. Each company is going to have a different pricing model. I mentioned most contractors will be level 3 or below, but information is unfolding weekly on this. I was just talking to a gentleman in the back, and the government is being actually pretty good about push on information and responsive. They're having webinars and everything about that. So they are updating it, and information is unfolding pretty frequently. Next slide, please, Kevin. So what is it? Here is brass tacks. 17 domains. If you're looking at these domains and you're familiar with 800-171, they should look familiar. There's a few other ones, but in essence, these domains have separate kind of breakout requirements. Depending on which level you want to be, like think of it, and I didn't put this in here just to keep this presentation small, but think about a slice of these are going to be assigned to each level. So if every single one of them is a level 5, you can kind of scale down. And the powers that be have determined that, okay, a level 3, for example, maybe you only need 75% of the incident response requirements. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the actual document right now is 90-something pages that breaks down all the security controls. But this is an overview of the categories. And if you look at this, all of these are important, and that's why they're in there. At some level, you got to factor this in, no matter if you're a small company or a large company. Next slide, please, Kim. So the framework, at a high level, it's got domains, capabilities, and practices. And brass tacks, you look over here, here are the levels. You've got level 1, you've got practices and processes. And you've got 1 through 5, and it goes basic, intermediate, good, proactive, and advanced. On the practices side, the processes, you got performed, documented, managed, reviewed, and optimized. Now, if you go to the next slide, Kevin, this is interesting too. So people ask, well, what does it mean if you got 2 domains? What if I'm really good in practices, but I suck at the processes? Well, what that means is that you go to the lowest level. So if you're level 4 in practices, but you're level 2 in processes, your certification is going to be level 2. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're looking at these. These all matter you can't just gaff them off because they're hard to do. So in the actual document lays out what all of these are. Does that make sense to everybody before I go on? Okay, next slide. All right, how to prepare. This is what I think is kind of the brass tacks. What do I do? Well, first off, don't wait. The cool thing is, and I showed you those 17 domains, they're based on NIST 800-171. And the guidance says that basically if you're full up on 171 right now, if you could go get certified by a third party to look at all your controls and say they're meeting everything in 171, you're going to be a level 3. So use it as a benchmark. I've got a client right now, and they're asking the same thing, like, where am I going to be? Well, I don't know 100%, right, because this stuff is rolling out there. Just the documents are still in draft form, but as I can tell you with about a 95% probability, you're probably at 2.5 because you're not quite 171, but you're better than basic, right? So it's a good milestone. Now, I think it would really help, especially if you're getting going, to know generally where you're at and where you got to be, so you know that delta, so you can close that gap. So start with 171. Take a look at that. That's already out there. It's published. It's not an easy requirement to meet. It's pretty robust, but it's going to give you an awesome starting point. Know your data. Does everybody know? I always ask the question. Is everybody pretty sure they know what kind of data they handle? Like the most sensitive level of data? You'd be surprised. Some people don't know exactly what that is. And if you're curious, go to the NARA registry, and it's interesting. I didn't even know this organization existed until I started really digging into this archives. They handle all the information classifications in the government, and they say, here's all the types of CUI, controlled unclassified information, and there's like 60 different types. You'd be surprised. Health information, technical information, everything. So go in there and you can search and find like, oh, I actually do handle controlled technical information because I'm writing technical specs for a software or a product that's actually included in a spaceship. That's controlled information. So keep that in mind. I encourage you guys to go to that registry and understand what type of information you got. Know where it's stored and know how it's transmitted. Know where that information's sitting. Know how it's getting transmitted to your clients, your customers, to partners. You got to know those. It's a good start. And lastly, treat your cybersecurity program as a business enabler as opposed to just a sunk cost. A really good example recently with the company here that I was helping out is their security program was a showstopper if they couldn't produce a documented evidence that they had a security program. A very large company say, we are not going to continue unless we can dig into this and you've got proof that you can do this. Thankfully, they had proof and they got the contract, right? So keep that in mind. It is a business enabler and it's only going to get more important going forward. And the government is taking this very seriously to the point where it's going to be included in contracts, and there's going to be, I think that's the next slide actually. Go ahead, Kevin, one more. Yep, the website, no, next slide. Okay, sorry. So this may have been a backup slide, but when the government is going to release a contract, they're going to state what CMMC level is required for that contract. You've got until time of award to become compliant, all right? So there's a difference between the bidding process, the award is the last thing, but if it's the RFPs, they're gonna state, hey, this is what we expect this to be, a level 2, level 3, level 4. If you're not a level 4, it would behoove you to not waste the time in going after this. If it says you're gonna be level 4, it's gonna be really hard to close that gap between the time you get it and the time of award, especially if that cycle is pretty quick. So keep that in mind. That's how the government is going to force this. They're going to force it through the contracting efforts to say, here are the requirements you have to meet, just like everything else. You got to have contracting, you got to have everything, the accounting procedures in place. You got to have all that. So that was a shotgun blast of CMMC overview. I try to keep it high enough for general awareness, but I didn't get too technical. So I'll shut up and I'll field any questions you guys got. Yes, sir.
Is there a general size for the size of company that satisfies these different levels? Or can a small company get to level 4?
Okay, his question was, can a small company get to level 4? Is there a size requirement? The answer is yes. However, when you look at the requirements to get to level 4, some of them would be pretty burdensome for a really small company with not a lot of funding to actually meet those requirements. You're talking managed SOC, which is like basically someone's managing your network. You're tracking all your data ins and outs. I mean, so it can be burdensome. Not that you can't do that in house, but you have to have someone to do it. So you either got to pay someone to do it, or you got to go hire a security analyst who really knows their stuff to do this for you. And as a small company, that's maybe a burdensome cost. So yes, it can be done. However, there's creative ways to meet these requirements as well. Yes, sir.
How do you address third-party risk in vendors that a company's working on when you're doing the assessment?
Good. Okay, the question about third-party risk. How do you assess that? That's a good question. As we were talking about earlier about how do you roll these down. When you're looking at, one of the requirements is to have a third-party risk management program. And that basically means, so if I'm doing business with Kevin, if I've got the contract to support the government, but Kevin is a subcontractor of mine, and he's building a device that's critical to this product. Well, Kevin is a key subcontractor, but I got the contract. The CMMC means that he has to meet that same requirement as well. So the government will not, if I've got a bunch of subcontractors with level 1s or level nothings, that's not gonna work. You have to roll those requirements down. So the question is how do you do that? You work with your vendors right now to get them to start building a security program. I call it push the pain down. Pushing the pain down means you're taking those questionnaires and the due diligence process for your critical vendors and your suppliers, and you're making them meet the same things.
So are you asking them for attestations as well, or the ability to go in and review kind of their evidence?
Absolutely.
CMMC?
Absolutely. Now, until this gets official, until they actually start certifying this, yes, dive in, ask them, say, where are you at? Because they're gonna have to get a certification too. Right? So you don't want them, if they don't know about it, if you've got small subcontractors or small vendors who maybe aren't prepared, have no idea, it would behoove you to reach out to their point of contact and say, by the way, this is coming. If you still want to do business with me on this contract, you're gonna be at level 2. You're gonna get to level 2. And there's questionnaires out there that you can push down. There's a process to manage that risk, but that's at a high level, yeah. But you gotta push that pain down, and you gotta be assessing them yourself at a high level. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Is it a recurring certification requirement? Is it
So they have an
certification for each contract proposal submission, or is it every quarter or every
So
year?
the government actually has not officially stated how long the certification is gonna last. I believe this is a big conflict for them because there are so many variables that could impact this. So let's just say, for example, Kevin Industries has a level 3, and then he gets bought by a larger company and they wrap up his networks. Well, now that threat and that attack surface is drastically different. So my guess is they're gonna set triggers that will trigger a reevaluation or reassessment, very similar to, some other situations that would require the government to kind of dig into everything and reassess on an audit or a tax reasons. Yes, sir.
How does this affect other customer relationships that a company has?
How does that affect other customer relationships?
In other words, if you're doing work for the DoD, but you're also doing work for other companies, does your compliance with level whatever affect those relationships in terms of providing security to meet the DoD standards in terms of how you communicate with your other clients, customers?
If I understand your question correctly, and I may not, but basically if you got a certification to serve the government, how does that impact your ability to help other
Yeah, so I've
clients?
got 5 other customers that are not DoD related, and I say, I'm going after a DoD certification for ComSec or for crypto, and I'm sorry, but that's gonna affect our relationship to communicate customers 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, it's good. So I'm pretty sure I understand. So the government, when they're looking at, they're concerned about what type of information are you handling that's relative to them. So from a technical standpoint, I think that you could potentially look into segmenting off your network for DoD specific information that you can wrap your box around. This is the certification level. Yes, we're certified as a company, but we have this information, so there's no bleed over. So it's not going to impact other companies, other customers. Again, there's a lot of variables depending on what your business model is, how other customers are interacting with your data, access to the networks, access to your facilities, a lot of things that could impact that risk level. But I think my guess is if you're getting a certain level, it'd be a good business, kind of a good marketing pitch for other customers in the civilian sector, right? If you've been certified to handle government information at a level 3, well, that's going to only serve your other customers and partners better because that's going to mean your whole organization is up to that level. Does that make sense? And you could probably include it as a marketing pitch. Yes, sir.
Will each contract only have a single CMC level, or will there be different levels depending on the information
Yeah, one level. They're gonna go to the highest level of that.
Well, that will prevent any small business from ever working for Lockheed then. So take the F-35, which is obviously gonna be a level 5. You're telling me that it's gonna be a level 5 even for the tire supplier?
You know, that's a good question as far as how far down the supply chain it rolls. Now, again, this is a problem. I've got another client who's in the aerospace and defense industry, and they're looking at the same thing as far as their supply chain. How, you know, they say they've got one company in middle of nowhere, Texas, that makes one bolt that is included in this thing. It's like, you know, this high pressure bolt, and they can only people that can do this, but it's included in a F-35, whatever. What is the responsibility of that company? Well, it goes down to the information they handle. So if you're a supplier for Lockheed and that information flow of that critical information goes all the way down, they're gonna have to figure it out, a way to make it work. And I think that's the only way to actually do that. That or they just start cutting off information as far as what that smaller company is handling, right? But that is a challenge, not gonna lie.
I'm also hearing from the Air Force specifically that the levels may change based on a phase, if it's a phase contract or something like that, where the deliverables get more complex as you go into it. So,
Yep.
I think a lot of it's, well, you're the expert, I think a lot of it's kind of, they're gonna launch it and then they're gonna figure out where the friction points are and then they're gonna have to.
And that's what I want to
Play more
affirm
roles.
as well, is that this is the timelines for rollout on this. The most recent guidance, I just heard the program manager from the ASD who's handling this, June, July timeframe, they're gonna start looking at the assessments for levels 1 through 3. The level 4 through 5, they're gonna be the fall of 2020. So they're basically saying, look, this is coming, we don't know exactly the exact date of when, but be preparing for this and don't wait, is kind of what they're saying. But at the same time, yeah, they're still trying to figure out, hey, how do we, if you've got a small company that just makes one little piece, they may need to be a level 1 now, but maybe in 2 years, whenever they're a bigger player, we're gonna up their certification requirement. That's huge because they're saying, we're gonna help you. We're gonna help you. You don't have to show all the burden on this alone.